Venezuela's government and a section of the opposition plan to hold talks backed by the United States. But prominent opposition politician and Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado has been excluded. So what can the talks achieve, and what's Washington seeking to get from it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Frankie McCamley. The last 7 months have seen Washington insert itself into Venezuela's politics and economy. It started with the US capturing President Nicolas Maduro in January and taking him to New York to face drug trafficking charges. The US now determines how Venezuela accesses its oil revenues, the mainstay of its economy. The White House has also backed interim leader Delcy Rodriguez while brokering talks between the Venezuelan government and opposition factions. But high-profile opposition figure Maria Corina Machado has been sidelined. So is Washington dictating the agenda of the talks? We'll get to our guests in a moment, but first this report from Emma Boateng.
Venezuela is trying to recover in several ways, from devastating earthquakes in June as well as political turmoil. In January, US forces raided President Nicolas Maduro's home in Caracas and removed him from power. Maduro had led the country for more than a decade. He was accused of failing to deal with the country's economic problems, despite having the world's largest proven oil reserves. The US has since taken control of Venezuela's oil exports and suspended some sanctions. The Trump administration installed Delcy Rodriguez, then vice president, as the new interim leader. President Donald Trump has repeatedly expressed his support for her, and the US is backing the political negotiations about to take place between her government and members of the opposition next week.
As far as the elections in Venezuela, they're not really ready for them yet, but boy, a lot of progress has been made. Delcy's been doing a fantastic job, as you know.
The meeting is between the head of the National Assembly, Rodriguez's brother, and opposition members led by Dinora Figuera. She returned to Venezuela in June after nearly 8 years in exile. She was among those elected to the National Assembly in 2015 when the opposition secured a majority. Top of the agenda is help for people affected by the earthquakes, but the overall aim of the discussions is reforming the political system. Supporters from rival political parties have been out on the streets, calling for genuine political reform and elections as soon as possible. There's one notable absence from the upcoming talks. Prominent opposition politician Maria Corina Machado, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize last year, says her movement is not involved in the negotiations. She was the driving force of a 2024 presidential campaign fronted by her ally Edmundo Gonzalez after she was barred from running. US and international election observers said her party won around 2/3 of the vote, but the election authority declared Nicolas Maduro the winner, securing him a third term in office. Machado says she doesn't oppose the negotiations over Venezuela's political transition. Those taking part say the talks mark a new chapter for the country as it tries to move forward economically and politically. Emma Boateng, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests. In Caracas, we have Elias Ferrer. He's an analyst focusing on political economy and the founder of Orinoco Research. In New York, Vanessa Neumann, founder and CEO of Asymmetrica and former official representative for Venezuelan opposition figure Juan Guaido. And in Valdivia, Chile, Ambassador Charles Shapiro, a former US ambassador to Venezuela. A warm welcome to all of you. Elias, I just want to start with you. You're in Caracas. We have seen these talks. We've seen numerous talks, 5 major talks in a decade. You've got your ear to the ground. We've already heard that the talks have been delayed slightly. Have you got any sense of how they're going to play out from what you've been hearing?
Well, I think it's very important to look at who's involved and where is this coming from. This is 100% coming from the United States, right? This is not some kind of like internal process where the government and opposition are coming together. And the people that are really central to this are Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Mauricio Claver, who right now he's not any kind of public official, but he's been very much involved in Venezuelan politics after January 3rd, right? And then also what we're seeing inside of Venezuela, presumably this was going to be, this National Assembly elected in 2015 and the current National Assembly, but really this is a negotiation between the government, the Venezuelan government on the one hand, with interim President Delcy Rodriguez, and on the other, we only have two opposition parties, which are also deeply unpopular. But because they're part of this assembly, which is recognized by the United States and other countries as the last, democratic institution of Venezuela, they have control of certain assets and they have some international legitimacy, even though they're very unpopular inside of Venezuela. So really, this is not, both sides in this negotiation are not very legitimate in the eyes of the people, but they do have some kind of like legal standing or institutional standing, and they're going to be used to rubber stamp whatever the United States wants, or the Trump administration more specifically wants out of Venezuela. And that involves certain political things, right? Like some institutionalization, maybe some election down the line. We're not talking about an election for maybe a year or 2 years even. But also, this is a very important thing economically, right? There are a lot of oil mining deals, the debt restructuring that are being managed by the United States, right? And this commission between these two sides is going to be really important to rubber stamp whatever the United States asks for from Venezuela.
Elias, a lot to unpack there. Let's go over to you, Vanessa. I can see you nodding there. Maybe an agreement, we'll see. But let's just look at the makeup of these talks. Do you feel like the opposition party is truly represented here? We are talking about someone that has been left out of these talks.
Right. Thank you for having me on. Well, I think that it's we've been down this road before. We've been down this road with a number of negotiations with the opposition. Even while I was posted to London, there was a negotiating team sent to Mexico City, and those carried on, and they were, Norway was involved in mediating them, and it got nowhere. What ended up happening was that President Biden handed Alex Saab back to Maduro after many, many years of special, operations of the DEA and then now Trump has gotten it back. So what Trump will want out of this is something completely different. I think everyone has something to gain and something to lose with elections, right? The United States has turned Venezuela into a vassal state. It is very much United States is in charge at every single level. For the United States that considers that they are the ones footing the bill in effect for this is American point of view on the intervention, it's American blood, American businesses, American, etc. They're not going to want to let go of control quite so easily. So they will want to have someone elected that they have a good relationship with, perhaps someone who's part American or someone who has deep ties with the United States and they can count on. I think in the past, even when Maria Corina Machado was invited to the White House by then President Bush, there was within Washington, D.C. some suspicion that, or a sense, which continues today, particularly with her rallying cry, which I saw in Madrid, of a la Venezolana, meaning which is pretty anti-American, really, is the interpretation that they will do it the Venezuelan way. The Americans kind of say, well, thanks, but no. However, everybody needs some legitimacy here, right? The Venezuelan administration needs to have, the Americans need to be seen to support, democracy and some sort of representation, even if they are going to keep Venezuela as a bit of a vassal or a puppet state or even a territory, which is what I suspect will happen. The administration within Venezuela needs some legitimacy, especially I'll give you a prime example. Delcy Rodriguez has gone to London on the case I worked on, which was the gold, right? There's 2.5 tons of gold, actually more than that, billions of dollars of gold bullion in the Bank of England, which they can't access until they are a recognized government for winning legitimate elections. Delcy has written to King Charles to get that. That is one, but many, many, many instances of frozen bank accounts all over the world that they will not want to access by winning an election. So Delcy wants to win the election. The Venezuelan people need to see something that looks like some sort of national sovereignty, and the United States also need Venezuelans to, and they need to have Venezuela look sovereign, and like there is some rule of law to get all of those businesses back in Venezuela. If you want to pump the oil, you want to build the infrastructure, you want the natural gas. The United States under Trump is, and I agree with this policy, by the way, friendshoring, right? They are nearshoring their critical supply chains for energy and sovereignty, and computing energy sovereignty, including computing sovereignty for critical minerals and everything else, to the Western Hemisphere. And Venezuela is key to that. It's not a wrong policy, but you have to understand what's going on in Venezuela within that context. The United States needs the businesses to get going. That requires rule of law. The United States wants to keep rule of law, but someone they can trust in place.
Yeah.
And Delcy Rodriguez has high refusal rating.
Okay, Vanessa, I'm just going to jump in here. Charles, I'd love to get your thoughts as well on this, the makeup of those who are attending these talks, who's attending, who's been excluded. What do you think? And the US's involvement in these talks too. Do you agree with Elias and Vanessa?
I'm in the uncomfortable position of mostly agreeing with both of them. First time on a panel for me. Look, these are talks set up by the United States to give the appearance of progress towards democratization without any real progress towards democratization. The Delcy Rodriguez government, I got to make little finger signs when I say government, because it is so illegitimate, cannot win an election. They got trounced in an election 2 years ago. Delcy Rodriguez might be the most unpopular politician in Venezuela. The most popular politician in Venezuela is Maria Corina Machado, who is being excluded by the Trump administration. So the goal for the Delcy and Jorge Rodriguez is to delay as much as they can. They did that in 2004 with a recall referendum. They did that in the 2010s with indefinite talks that lasted forever, and where they focused on legalisms and paperwork and all kinds of stuff except the real issues. And that's exactly what's going on now. We're not focusing on the real issues.
And the real issues, Elias, what are they? What do Venezuelans want to see change in their country when they're looking at these politicians?
I think that, most people will probably say that they want to see elections, right? Most people inside of Venezuela, at least. But then what we see, and here, I think I need to, take a point that Charles said, which is that, this is a strategy of the Venezuelan government or of Delcy Rodriguez to delay. But I think, this is 100% coming from the United States. So I don't know if it's so much a delaying tactic, but something that the Trump administration wants. And then I think the big question here is, does the Trump administration want an election in Venezuela anytime soon, right? And I think this is the key question that we need to see. And if they push for an election, what do they want that to look like? And this commission is probably going to be looking at the electoral authority and the different institutions that ultimately in 2024 they said that Maduro won, and they kind of like put an end to the discussion, like the Supreme Court as well, and that's supposed to be the mandate of this commission. I'm not sure, if they're going to want a completely free and fair election very soon, as in like 2027, so next year. But and I think this is where we're probably gonna start seeing some kind of clash, because right now, besides Maria Corina Machado, someone who is really popular politically is Trump and Marco Rubio. What happens if they're saying, it's not time for elections, and they keep, delaying, and they keep doing business deals, and with oil and mining and the restructuring, and they keep praising Delcy Rodriguez, but they're not doing the election, which is presumably what most polls say that the Venezuelans want.
And just looking at the structure of these talks, right at the top, it says that they are going to be looking at the assistance of victims from both earthquakes. Vanessa, why do you think that this has been put at the top? Will disaster work where politics haven't? Is this a way to bring both sides together, do you think?
Yes. There's sort of a classic in politics that there are two things where you can get opposing sides together, right? One is sport, things like FIFA events, and the other one is to work together to resolve a natural disaster, right? Because natural disasters are apartisan. Nobody caused them. Mother Nature caused them, although arguably the scale of the disaster was caused by so many years of kleptocracy and corruption. And it's something that actually, to move the money and to move the supervision of the money, both in order to access the funds. Again, we tried to do this when I was posted to London. If you got the two sides to come together, then you would get access to those funds and get some sort of tracking and tracing of those funds, so that both have their neck in the docket, so to speak. You know, if money goes missing, both sides have something to lose, and they have something to work on together, and they can both claim success if it goes well. In my experience, we've tried this before, which was during the pandemic. It didn't really work. Arguably, the earthquakes are so visible and it's so spectacular, on a global scale, that working together to resolve that would be good for both parts, not to mention the Venezuelan people who need it. You can't have elections in a country that is already has a destroyed infrastructure, and now where we have tens of thousands or up to 100,000 people, we don't know, because honest figures are hard to come by in Venezuela, who are displaced. I mean, where are these guys going to vote? How are you going to run that? So that would be one of the things that the Trump administration is trying to get the actual infrastructure of back up, and to get these parties to work together, because it's other than sport, natural disasters, the second place you bring other opposing sides together.
And Charles, with your diplomatic background, do you agree? Is this the right way to approach these talks, to bring these parties together? Of course, we've seen so many failed talks in the past.
I would have started these talks a week after January 3rd. Look, offline, not with the political parties necessarily, but with university presidents, top lawyers, respected officials, maybe retired politicians.
Is it too little too late
behind
then?
The scenes. So, I mean, you can start now, but having these formal talks set up between the other panelists can explain to you the assembly of 2015 versus the current assembly. I mean, you can't explain that to somebody without giggling, because it makes no sense at all. The parties in Venezuela are Maria Corina Machado, the guy who was elected president 2 years ago, and the United States of America. It's the United States of America.
Let's talk about her then, Charles. She's not involved. She's not at the table at the talks. So are these talks even legitimate?
I can't tell you what legitimate means in the Venezuelan context anymore. Look, we're going through this, and I don't mean me personally, we're going through this charade of pretending that Venezuelan institutions are legitimate, that the Chavista assembly is legitimate, that Delcy Rodriguez, who is the henchman of Nicolas Maduro, is legitimate, that the way the United States is handling their oil funds with complete lack of transparency is legitimate, and that excluding the most popular politician in the country is legitimate. All of this is something that we're trying to tie together and make something out of. And in reality, if you want to talk about legitimacy, after 6 months vacancy of a president, there's supposed to be elections in Venezuela. Nobody thinks there should be elections today, because there's no faith in the electoral roll. That is, who votes and where do they vote, and how do Venezuelans in the exterior, outside the country, vote. There's certainly no faith in the National Electoral Council, which stole the election of 2024. I mean, essentially turned out the lights, turned them back on, and when they turned the lights on, they said, we won. And there's no faith in the Supreme Court, which then validated the theft of the election. So what needs to be done goes way beyond, the electoral mechanism defined narrowly, and it's broadly, and change needs to come.
Okay, Elias, I'd just like to get Sorry, please just continue there, Charles.
Sure. Well, what I was going to say is that Secretary Rubio keeps talking about phases 1, 2, and 3, and that elections can only come after the economy's recovered. I don't think the economy can recover unless there's a transition to democracy. What you're seeing now is businesses, not American businesses, but Venezuelan businesses are not investing in Venezuela. European and Latin American businesses are not investing in Venezuela because there's no rule of law in Venezuela, and you'd be foolish to invest where there's no rule of law. Venezuelans are not returning home. I've spent the last 10 days in Peru and Chile, where there are thousands and thousands of Venezuelans. Everyone I've met, I ask, what do you think of don't trust Delcy Rodriguez. When are you returning home? I'm not going home. If Venezuelans don't feel that this is a safe enough place to return home, there's a basic problem here, and that problem can be solved through democracy. Venezuela needs more democracy, not less.
And Elias, I just want to get your thoughts on Charles's comments there. Vanessa, I'll come to you in a moment. But the fact that so much needs to change in the country in order to instill democracy, is there a kind of a timeline that people are looking at? Is there, how long can something like this take? I know I'm asking you to look into a crystal ball here, but there is so much that needs to change.
Well, I think it's, it might look like a lot, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't need to do, everything in one go, right? First of all, I would say that there is no clear timeline, right? As Charles said, there is some kind of 3-stage plan, but we don't really know at which stage we are. We depending on which Trump administration official, we're in a different stage. Right. We don't know how long these last, and I think it's more a way that the administration has of, saying that they're doing something about democracy in Venezuela without really being specific about what they're actually doing. But I think it's less about how much needs to be done and how big of a task it is than are we actually moving in that direction. We might be with this new negotiation. It might be that the United States is really interested this time in having an election that's going to have a legitimate government because it's been elected and so on. Or it might be that they're not really looking into that, and then we're just not moving in that direction at all. Because I mean, if the United States right now is happy with controlling a lot of the oil revenues and the strategic parts of the Venezuelan economy, why would it want to have a legitimate government that can challenge control, right?
Yeah, okay.
And,
yes.
and this is why, I mean, we might talk about how Delcy Rodriguez is very unpopular, but these two parties that are represented from the opposition are, their leaders are even more unpopular than the government, right? If you look at,
Elias, I'm just going to let Vanessa jump in here. Really good thoughts, small steps. Vanessa.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce some points that Charles made, which is specifically, yes, all of those institutions need to be remade, starting with the electoral rolls, who lives where, all of that. I agree 100% with what he said. I want to double down on one of his points, which is the role of the people outside, right? So the diaspora. The one of the great ironies, and one of the things I have always advocated for very publicly, including in private meetings and in private meetings with U.S. government officials, is that the constitution that the Maduristas or the Chavistas put in place is ironically the first constitution of Venezuela that allows the vote from Venezuelan citizens outside. So one of the things that we should do is to hold their feet and say, Well, that means that people living outside Venezuela, the way US citizens can vote in national elections, right? Okay, you may not be able to vote for your local council member if you're not, in Caracas or Maracaibo or Puerto Cabello, but you can certainly vote for presidential elections the way the US and many other countries do.
Absolutely.
And their own constitution calls on that. The reason why this is key is because there are 8 million of us overseas who overwhelmingly for the opposition. And that is why the Chavistas don't want to allow me and 8 million others to vote.
Okay, really interesting point there, Vanessa. I just want to ask you, we've not got much time left. This always goes so quickly. It's so interesting to speak to you all. But I know there's a level of skepticism from all three of you when it comes to these talks, but if there was one piece of success, one thing that you would see come out of these talks that you thought, actually, we have made a step forward, what would it be? Elias, I'll start with you.
So, I mean, presumably they're going to reform the electoral authority and the Supreme Court. So actually having more independent people, or maybe having it, bringing in some opposition parties or something like that into those two institutions could actually be very meaningful. And then, once there are, presidential and local elections and so on, these are probably going to, respect the results and so on, and, make decisions that are, that are more independent or autonomous.
Okay, Vanessa, over to you, just really briefly, if that's okay.
Yes, to include non-politicians or to include new people, new politicians. I can tell you that it's very, having worked with the opposition, they're very burnt. They're tired. They've suffered a lot of, backlash, consequences, scandals, etc. And I think a lot of Venezuelans want to see other Venezuelans come to the fore.
Wonderful.
And
Charles,
there are plenty of people who are intelligent, talented, and have integrity. Let's see them.
Great. Charles, just to you.
I agree with Vanessa. Let me add one more thing. And this is a little bit off, but look, as of Friday, there were still 371 political prisoners being held by Delcy Rodriguez in the Venezuelan prisons.
Okay.
They need to be released. They need to be released today. This is just, we Americans should be ashamed that we're running a country without running the damn country.
Well, thank you to our guests. That's Elias Ferrer, Vanessa Neumann and Charles Shapiro. Thank you for joining us. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Frankie McCamley, and the team here. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned.